Hey guys, how are you? I miss seeing you all. I'm going to read the story The Big Orange Splot by a Hyde Park author named Daniel Pinkwater. It's one of my favorite books, as you can tell. It's very, very well worn and read. Okay, here we go. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. There's Mr. Plumbean. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean's street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then one day, there's that very neat street. A seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. No one knows why. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. And he dropped the can, no one knows why, right over Mr. Plumbean's house. It made a big orange splot on Mr. Plumbean's house. Ooh, too bad, everybody said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange spot for a long time, and then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange spot. Someone said, Mr. Plumbean, we wish you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. There's that big orange spot. He got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange spot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. My favorite. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same. But Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was an explosion. Yeah. Notice Mr. Plumbean at work and an explosion. There was the big orange spot, and there were little orange spots. There were stripes. There were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. Those were all an old-fashioned way of saying they think he's a little nuts. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools. That night, he built a tower on top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. So see this? Elephants, steam shovel, lion, all sorts of polka dots. Still the big orange spot. The next day, the people said, Plumbean has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, and slipped his hawser, I think. They decided they would pretend not to notice. And there he's got his tower there, too. See that? Hard not to notice, huh? The very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. Yes. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. They saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. Yes. Go, Mr. Plumbean. He looks quite content. Plumbean has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbean, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. And this is the best part. Remember this line. My house is me, and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams, said Mr. Plumbean. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to go and have a talk with him. Tell him what we all liked. We liked it all here before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours so we can have a neat street. He looks very happy to me. The man went to see Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees drinking lemonade and talking all night long. Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. Guess what he likes? "What have you done to your house?" they shouted at the man. And he said, "My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be and it looks like all my dreams," said the man who had always loved ships. "He's just like Plumbean," the people said. "He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, and knots in his noodle." Another way to say, whoop, whoop. Then, one by one, they went to see Mr. Plumbean late at night. They would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day, that person would set about changing his own house to fit his or her dreams. Well, here's the man with his boat. Oh, look at this. Someone wants to go around the world in a big balloon. Someone wants to have the Taj Mahal. Oop, a castle, of course, with a moat. And look at that, the Pantheon. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the stranger would say, "This is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be and it looks like all our dreams." There they are, all together. Looks like a grand street to me. So when I used to read this in the library to the kids, I would always pass out some paper and crayons and colored pencils and ask the kids to draw what their house would look like if it represented them and all their dreams. Usually, I would draw a picture too. And of course, my picture has a little cabin or house. It's got to be by the water so I can kayak, and of course in the mountains so I can hike. So that would be what my little house would look like. Though the interesting thing is, I do live in a small apartment in a small town right near the river where I can paddle and right across the bridge from where I can go hiking in the Catskills. So sometimes life gives you things what you want, but in a different package. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the book and that you take the time to draw what your house would look like if it represented you and all your dreams. Okay, miss you guys. Hope you're all well and hope to see you soon. Bye.